Hey guys, how are y'all doing today? I hope your month's off to a good start. I know mine is. And I'm going to be reacting to one of Thunderbolt 1000 Science Productions videos. This is actually his newest rec documentary. He created it earlier in November. Well, around towards the end of October. I don't exactly remember, but somewhere around that time. Let's get my headphones on. Make sure that's good. Get this on the full screen. We are at high definition. Let's begin. Warning, this video may include images, videos, and details that may disturb younger viewers.
On October 30th, 1972, one of the worst train accidents
I saw
in the
the
history
thumbnail
of
here. I
Chicago
could have
would
sworn it was
occur.
going to be
A
CNNW.
small station,
But
a
Illinois
brand new
Central,
train
man.
set, gets demolished by an ancient one during the morning rush hour. It would also prove to be one of the most insane accidents in the history of commuter railroading.
You know, that really sucks, because I actually remember seeing in Chicago Odyssey Volume 2, a Green Frog video, that they had a lot of those 1920s cars. They didn't say exactly what kind they were,
The
but
accident took place.
they were really reliable cars. I mean, the fact that they've been around that long, that's pretty much like the Midwest version of SEPTA's Silverliner 4s, or the Pennsylvania Railroad's MP54s, which I think would be more appropriate since they were also around in that time. Right, let's continue, see what's going on here. I see a nice passenger train passing a pair of freights.
Place on the Illinois Central Gulf Railroad's Chicago Division, which was
Now
opened on
this
July
reminds me of another
21st,
video I actually saw.
1856.
I'm sorry, I know I just replayed the video, but I just got to point out. This reminds me of another video I saw of the Illinois Central. The narrator said that despite having 4 tracks, there would be like 2 trains traveling next to each other in opposite directions on both sides of the main line, as opposed to having like 2 tracks on one side for trains going in the same direction. I always thought that was pretty interesting.
Being one of the first commuter services outside the major metropolitan areas of the northeastern United States, running from Great Central Station, now Millennium Station, to Hyde Park. Originally
Hyde Park.
steam-powered, the line was electrified in 1926, powered by heavyweight Pullman EMUs, built between 1924 to 1926.
That's it? They're just
the
called
IC
EMUs?
Electric was once Chicago's busiest suburban railroad and carried a great deal of passenger traffic within the city, as well as to suburban
that doesn't surprise
communities.
me. When you see a lot of the
three
trains
lines
that the
carried
Illinois Central
26
had
million
during or
passengers
before
in
the 60s, it's easy to
1927,
see
the first full year
how
of
popular they
electrified
were and like
operation.
why a lot of people liked that
Ridership
railroad.
would rise to 35 million in 1929 and reach an all-time
We still
peak
have the city of New Orleans.
47 million in
That's
1946.
IC train that Amtrak took over when it was
By
created
the
in 1971.
1970s, though, the Pullmans were beginning to show their age, and once again passenger numbers were pretty high. The Illinois Central looked to purchase newer cars, but they wanted something a little different. Enter the Highlanders.
There we go. Ooh, St. Louis
One
Car
of the
Company.
first
Wow.
double-decker EMUs ever built. They more than doubled the Pullmans in terms of capacity, carrying over 156 passengers maximum per car, and can run much faster with a top speed of 80 miles an hour. The cars were numbered 1501 to 1630, being built by the St. Louis Car
So that would
Company.
explain. I saw some of these trains in 1973, and I actually thought that's when they first entered service. By 1972, Illinois Central merged with the GM&O to turn into ICG, or Illinois Central Gulf. So that explains why they still had this livery when the ICG arrived.
The cars would be put into
fascinating.
service in 1971, having a rather
I like the
clean
silver,
record
orange, and black.
until
Really nice.
one day, everything would change.
Oh, that's a nice
October
sunset.
30th, 1972. It was a rather cloudy,
Oh, okay, so
chilly,
he did do
and
this in
foggy
October.
morning, and rush hour was in full swing.
Thunder always likes to have
Illinois-
his Oh, Matt, of course. Thunder always likes to have his rec documentaries done like exactly on the date or close to the date of when the wreck actually occurred,
A flexible career.
which I think is pretty cool.
Illinois Central commuter train number 416 was traveling northbound toward downtown
That's a nice
Chicago,
shot, too.
making stops at every station along the line, including a flag stop at 27th Street Station. The train consisted of 4 new Highliner cars, the rear one being number 1509. The numbers of the other 3 cars is unknown. It departed South Chicago
With
Station at around
the color of the
7:06
ballast,
a.m.
this
Behind
kind of
them,
reminds me
another
of
train, Illinois Central
another part of
720,
Chicago I
an
saw.
express also traveling north to downtown
Actually, I
Chicago.
did see some trains on
had
this line
departed
near
9
Soldier
minutes
Field.
after 416, consisting
When
of
I was visiting
6
the city in
older
2018.
Pullman EMUs. The numbers of all the cars are unknown. Train 416 made all the necessary train stops between South Chicago and 53rd Street, and at each stop, the brakes appeared to be working fine.
That's
As
good.
the train passed 31st Street, the conductor announced that the next stop was 27th Street, the flag stop. According
Chicago
to the
didn't have a
engineer's
30th Street
post-accident
station, huh?
testimony, he estimated the train was traveling
Oh,
at
that's
around
beautiful.
62 miles an hour upon hitting the brakes for the station. This proved to be too fast as the Highliners overshot the platform, and when the train finally stopped, the rear car, 1509, was about 600 feet north of the platform and
Not
400
good.
feet north from the nearby signal. The conductor walked toward the 1509 and gave permission to his engineer to start reversing back into the station.
I wonder
around
if these
5 to
also
15
operate on
miles an
Metro.
hour. While the train was reversing, the conductor
wouldn't be that
remained in the
long.
center vestibule,
But it would also be
maintaining
interesting if
contact
they were
with
still
the
in
engineer about
existence,
how much
like, on
further he
Metro.
needed to go.
The
and
cars
leaned
I
out
saw
the east side of the train,
were
looking
different,
back,
actually.
but had to pull his head back in as train 718 passed by. Meanwhile, 720 was fast approaching and was switched onto track 3 after 67th Street. The very same track, 416,
Yeah, I always
was
found it
still
interesting
reversing
how
on.
Chicago,
The
and I guess
engineer
a
of
couple of other
720
parts of the
stated in
Midwest
a
have that color of
post-accident
ballast
testimony
under the
that he had
tracks.
already started
Where
slowing
everything
down
else is
since he was
usually
expecting
silver,
to see
or
train
not silver,
16 at
gray.
any moment leaving the station. Little did he know, 416 was literally right in front of him, going backwards on the same track. And when he finally saw the train, he blew his horn in alarm before diving out of the cab, yelling at the passengers to brace themselves for an imminent crash.
That's unfortunate. I mean, I know it's the, not again. Anyways, I know it's the engineer's fault of the double-deckers for overrunning the platform at like 62 miles an hour. I mean, for all we know, he could have been speeding. But at the same time, the guy operating the MUs from Pullman, the older cars, did he not have a red signal? I mean, I don't know if cab signals were around on the Illinois Central back then, or any trains around Chicago, but you should still pay attention to the actual signals itself. I mean, if you're at red, stop. That's really all I gotta say for now. And I'm back. Just gonna enjoy some good old-fashioned apple juice. Good stuff from Best Buy. I know the name of the company is pretty generic, but still really, really good. Now with that out of the way, let's continue.
The collision was devastating. The lead
I
car
bet.
of 7020 telescoped into the rear Highliner 1509, a phenomenon that was once common in the 19th and early
Ooh,
20th
that's a
century
terrible
when
picture.
passenger cars were still mostly made of wood, not heavyweight steel like these cars. Train
That's always an
718
interesting term I've heard a lot in wreck documentaries, like telescoping. And it just makes me think of telescopes. I mean, I know that's not really what it's about, but when it goes into another train like that, it sucks. It reminds me of another accident I saw in New York City with the Long Island. 2 trains crashed into each other. It wasn't even going that fast, like 25 or 35 miles an hour, and yet it still killed 78 people. Really, really unfortunate.
consisting of 8 heavyweight Pullman EMUs, which was pacing just ahead of 720 on the adjacent track number 4, was also hit by some of the flying debris of the collision
Oh, good
as
Lord.
the rear
Wow.
car was hit, but it didn't derail. When news of the crash spread, a 3-alarm fire call was issued for the incident, and all the available ambulances in the area were dispatched to the scene, along with fire crews. Thankfully, response time was quick, as 27th Street Station directly serves the Michael Reese Hospital, located only 100 yards away. Dr. Edward Goldberg, a surgeon from the hospital, later quoted,
"Human limbs were hanging out the windows. There was just one
Who's this
22-year-old
guy?
fellow whose heart stopped, but he was revived. About the only thing doctors and nurses could
I'm
do at
interested
the
because
scene
I know
was
some of
apply
these
torches and splits and
documentaries. You have a
bandages.
couple of other people working with Thunder to
the station platform
voice
was
people,
turned into
like
an
they have
outdoor
certain quotes
hospital
there.
as rescuers descended on the scene.
They recall the accident. And I actually did that once for Alec in his Hoboken wreck documentary, where New Jersey Transit had an unfortunate derailment back in 2018, if I remember correctly. I also included that in my parody of Engines of SEPTA 4.
To free victims and treat the injuries. It took over 6 hours for 240 firefighters to finally remove both the dead and the injured from the 2 trains, which had over 1,000 passengers combined. In total, 45 people died.
Alright, so not as bad as the
332 were
Jamaica
injured.
wreck with the 2 Long
People
Island
were
trains that I
confused,
mentioned
though.
earlier, but
How could these 2 trains
the
collide?
fact that
Did one of them miss a
so
signal?
many people... Oh, hang on.
New car train that I was on went past 27th, and he had passengers to get off. But
I
apparently
said
they
that
overshot the platform.
there was
like
someone
it's only
that
flight,
had a
obviously, and unless they
missed
tell them they won't
signal.
stop. Well, somebody must have raised their hand at the last minute or something, because we overshot the platform by about 15 feet.
Right now, there's ambulances, going in front of me now.
And here's the other guys
all kind of
going
fire
too
equipment,
fast.
and they're coming back and forth like a parade. One half a car was completely demolished, and there was people screaming, and people walking around with blood on them, and it was real bad.
You know, one thing I will say, I mean, I know these kind of things are unfortunate and you don't want them to happen, but when you look at how things were in the past, especially if you're a gearhead, you'll like seeing a lot of the emergency vehicles, like this Dodge Polara, I want to assume, here on the left side of the screen. Let's not forget those fire trucks. I mean, I'm more of a big fan of the C-Series Ford cabovers, but what I'm seeing in here so far is pretty cool, too.
The engineer started shouting, back up, back up. Then all of a sudden, I was not even sitting on the seat. I was sitting on the iron steps that they had because it was so crowded. And then all of a sudden, there was like a thunder and lightning and a crash and doors and
The
windows
lightning must have been
and
with the
cars
catenary
started
or
falling. The train next, I
the
was in the next
pantographs
train. Yeah, I could see that
leaving
they
the
were just
catenary.
jammed in, crushed in, and many of them were killed. And another train, and on my train, across from me, there was a man like with a bar across his neck, ready to be chopped off, shouting for help, and they were all bleeding. And I was sitting surrounded with glass and bars and doors. And I don't know, they pulled that away. The help came, and they pulled me out and had to carry me over the van.
You know, I can safely say that I've never been on a train when it crashed with another train, but one thing I do have in common with that lady is glass. Interestingly, what happened to me was I was just taking a shower at this one hotel, well, not really a hotel, more like a condo, in Kiowa Island, South Carolina. I was just using soap to wash my body. My hands were, they were near this glass shelf, but I know I didn't touch it. All of a sudden, the glass just breaks apart, and I got a big shard stuck in my right foot. There was so much blood, I had to sit down on the couch, and I'm glad I never had to experience that again. And that was like the worst thing that happened to me in 2020. While like millions of people were dying from COVID, I'm sitting on a couch after literally just getting out of the shower with a piece of glass stuck in my foot. Really unfortunate.
Off on 27th Street.
The NTSB was launched to investigate the crash.
Oh, the NTSB.
When they got on scene, they realized this accident
I'm
was
surprised
very
they were
similar
around
to
back
another
then.
accident 2 years
What was the
prior.
Interstate Commerce Commission doing?
On September 8th, 1970, an Illinois Central yard train, led by SW7-1218, collided with an
1218.
Indiana Harbor Belt yard train, led by NW2-8717, at Riverdale, Illinois. The collision occurred when the Illinois Central train was reversing under a restricting signal in automatic block signaling territory, and the Harbor Belt train didn't see them until it was too late. One of the main
so
probable
maybe I was
causes
right
of
about
that
the,
accident was the crew of the Illinois Central train did not properly give protection upon reversing their train.
Oh, I almost forgot about
It
that.
became quickly clear this accident at 27th Street was almost a repeat of that accident, and that the lessons and recommendations from the incident.
But still, there should have been a signal warning this MU train, like near the track. I mean, I get that. I know I'm saying this over and over again, and I'm sorry if it's annoying you guys, but the bi-level train, if they just minded their own business and stopped while following the speed limit at the station, they wouldn't have overrun it, and the other train wouldn't have rear-ended it. But at the same time, there should have been a signal warning these guys about this other train.
Incident in 1970 had gone ignored. However, just like all accidents,
Cadillac
they're caused by a
ambulance. That's
chain of
something you
critical
don't see
events
anymore.
that lead to disaster.
Unless, of course, you're at a classic car
First,
show.
the overrun. Now, overrunning the
Example of a minor
platforms,
overrun
that
occurring on the
wasn't a new
Northeast
thing
Corridor
on
at
the
Curtis
Illinois
Park Station
Central,
near Sharon Hill.
nor on other
Yeah,
railroads. In fact, they sometimes still happen on today's
you got a
railroads,
GG1
although
and
it
a
is
B54
quite
is nice.
rare. Overruns especially happen not long after the Highline
I know a lot
was
of
put into
people
service,
prefer,
due
like,
to crews still getting
the way the
familiar with
Pennsylvania
new.
Road was originally with the Tuscan red on all of their cars, but something about the dark green of the Penn Central, not just on the train being pulled by the GG1, but also on the MP54s. I like that better. I mean, it just seems appropriate for those kind of cars.
New cars.
Nice belt.
There was
too.
also an overrun buzzer in the cab so that the engineer can let the conductor know about the upcoming overrun.
I mean, that
These
overrun
overruns,
doesn't look
though,
bad. I
were
mean, you can just have all the passengers get out of that door or go on to the next car and leave there. I mean, New Jersey Transit does that all the time.
Pretty minor, often not exceeding one full car length, but this was different.
Yeah.
The entire train set had overrun the platform.
Now
That
that,
alone was
now
unusual.
that's not good.
It's likely in this case the engineer, who was running train 416 for the first time, being used to other trains he had been scheduled on, had completely forgotten about the flag stop at 27th Street Station and applied the brakes too late, overshooting the platform.
Alright.
Second, as train 416 backed up, the conductor had to stand in the center vestibule of the rear of the car in order to operate the intercom to the engineer.
Interesting,
Although
okay.
rules don't state where on the rear a trainman should stand during a reverse move, it's quite obvious he'd have to have a clear view of the rear end of the train. Even if he had the view, the location of the various controls would have interfered to some degree with him carrying out his job. The conductor's door control and
Alright, let's
intercom
skip
were
ahead to
train
see what
crew
happens
to
with
grab
the,
flags and/or light
MUs.
flares at a certain distance to gain protection as they reverse their train,
Might be
so
coming
that
up
the other
soon.
traffic can spot the flares and proceed to slow down or stop, looking for the other train.
That part's
Lack of
important
flag
too.
protection had led to several accidents in the last century of American railroading. Now, why didn't he take the
I
equipment?
can't tell if this picture, I'm sorry, if this picture right here, 9020, this is probably either with SEPTA Silverliner 3s or some other train not on SEPTA but with similar equipment. I'm probably sure I'll get a comment helping me answer that question soon.
Now, why didn't he take the equipment? Well, because management at Illinois Central failed to supply them, nor properly train the crews on such a task, as the incident crews and other train crews testified how they didn't fully understand such rules on flag protection, and even mistook some signal aspects. For example, a lot of the train crewmen didn't address the speed restriction necessary when passing
over
a
yellow.
yellow signal,
Right.
as you're supposed to slow down to at least 30 miles an hour upon passing one, instead of
Alright.
maintaining track speed. Now, we're not done. Station overruns and short backing movements without flag protection when it was required were addressed but either ignored or forgotten about by supervisors of the Illinois Central, some of them just flat out accepting it as it is. The acceptance of such things
That's
led
weird.
to the unprotected reverse move without flag protection and of course, not supplying crews with the proper tools for flag protection. But here's a question. How could the crew of Train 720 not see the train ahead?
Here we go.
The highliners were
Here's
quite
my
large
part.
after all. Did he miss a signal or something? The answer to such a question was yes and no.
Oh, yes
Now,
and
I know
no.
that sounds confusing, so let me explain.
All right, let's hear it.
The signals were all tested, and indeed, they were working as intended, although there is no prescribed sight distance for a train approaching a signal. The visibility of at least one of the signals, signal 3-3.10, was indeed a factor of the crash, as it was partly obstructed by a walkway that crossed over the tracks, defeating the purpose of the signal, because he couldn't see it.
That makes sense.
Furthermore, the engineer did not comply with the next signal, that being signal 3-3.60. The signals, both being color aspect types, displayed yellow, meaning caution, train ahead, prepare to stop at the next signal.
Yeah.
But the engineer didn't show much concern, as he knew he had a train ahead of him, being 416, but he assumed it was already leaving the station and was following up on it, so he didn't bother slowing down to at least 30 miles an hour as the signal told him to.
Yeah, that's definitely not good.
Instead, that said train was reversing backward into the station toward him. It is also very highly likely that as train 416 was reversing back
was taken
into
in
the block,
1971?
it had overrun.
ICR elect 1502 Chicago, May 1971. Wow. Quality's pretty good for 1971.
It was at the exact same time train
That's
720
1934.
had passed the approach signal. Otherwise, it would have shown a stop aspect and he would have to stop his train. Had the Pullmans been traveling at 30 miles an hour, not 60 miles an hour, they would have had more than enough time to stop before even touching the rear of the Highliner.
Yeah.
Furthermore, the reverse movements of trains into previously vacated signal box was incompatible with the short scheduled 2 to 3 minute
this was
headways
probably
between the
filmed
trains
in the early
and the time
90s.
required to initiate flag protection should it be
Or-
needed. Normal and logical
Metro.
procedures of when trains fully overrun
Somewhere
a platform
between,
was
I'm
often,
going to guess,
believe it or not,
1980 or
just
1990
continue
because
to
of the
the
film
next
quality.
station, especially after
You can tell it's
overrunning
filmed
a
on
signal
tape by the
block
left
on top of the station.
tint there.
Others would
or the
have
green tint on
passengers
the
that
left
wanted
side
to
of the video.
deboard walk back toward the rear of the train and let others get on via the rear. And finally, going back to the cars themselves,
Power
it
car.
was found the Pullmans lacked a speedometer of all things.
Oh.
The Highliners had them, but some, including the one on the lead Highliner, had a tendency to not work correctly.
That's a weird thing. I mean, you would
As for
think
how
that
the engineer could have missed the
all the
Highliners,
cars would have speedometers.
both the Pullmans and Highliners had dark liveries, with the front of the Highliners being completely black.
Wow.
This likely camouflaged the cars from the station platform in the overcast, dull morning, especially since the red marker lights weren't able to stand out enough. But at least the operator was able to warn of the impending collision when he finally spotted the Highliners seconds before impact. Had it been nighttime, as well as with thick fog, he probably would have completely missed the Highliners, hitting the cars at full force, resulting in
For a second,
many
I thought
more
he was going to say
casualties.
if it was just nighttime,
The
then
last
he would have an
thing
easier
that
time spotting the
NTSB
train
took
because
in
of the
note
red lights.
was the car designs. Both the Highliners and Pullmans had a heavy underframe. The underframes, designed to withstand coupling shocks, carried couplings at each end, so in join they'd prevent override in a collision. When they collided, they indeed worked as intended, but the coupler on the Pullmans was displaced downward due to the car being a little bit shorter and the trucks being on the loose side, breaking the
Interesting.
coupling carrier and causing the car to rise up ever so slightly and telescope into the Highliner.
There's that word again,
resulting in
telescope.
lots of deaths in both cars. In fact, the majority of the fatalities were in the rear Highliner 1509.
Yeah, it doesn't
which
surprise
was
me because you have more
described in
space in there.
reports as almost being sawed
All right,
in
I'm going to
half.
pause right here because my camera sometimes stops filming automatically after a certain amount of time, like around 15 minutes, and I don't want to risk having it stop recording now, so I'm going to take a little break, stop filming, and then we'll get back to the video very soon. We have 6 minutes left to go. We'll take a look at some of the other facts, or listen to the other facts, and then we'll stop once the end credits roll.
This was also because of the poor design of the cars. The The collision post failed because of the incomplete fusion between the plates and the underframe
More like confusion
from one
then, huh?
side, causing the car
they
to
couldn't
literally
finish it.
crumple more, and the telescoping only made the situation worse.
When I heard shopping with Rakuten earns you cash back on top of holiday deals, I thought, well, that can't possibly exist.
These ads are annoying.
The Highliner's poor crashworthiness,
But at
and
the
such
same
a
time, I
collision
understand
proved to
you
be
got
a
to make extra
deadly
money here and
factor
there.
in the crash. Not to mention, both designs clearly failed in a collision where the cars were not of the same type. To be fair, it is hard to determine how a car will
There's
stand
something
up
else you don't
without
see in the
ample
70s.
crash
Those
testing features.
big sideburns with short hair and a big mustache. I mean, you could probably still see people like that. I mean, I used to have pretty big sideburns myself. I recently shaved this morning, but not common as it was back then.
And every crash is different, but it really does make you think.
Unless, of course, you're stupid and don't know how to think.
As
There's
a
still
result
some
of
people
the
out there like that, too.
NTSB's findings, they recommended Illinois Central
so this is
reevaluate
filmed by the
its
Chicago
training
Fire
and
Department, all right.
policies to ensure crews not only follow their own safety protocols, but also supply them with the tools they need to follow such protocols.
Now, a while
The
ago,
accident
I know I
also
said
led
that
to
I
all the
also
Pullman
like
car-
seeing some of the old-fashioned fire trucks and other emergency vehicles, but another cool thing you get to see with these wreck documentaries are the cranes. You know, there's something about those cranes. They're always a lot of fun to see.
Incident also led to all the Pullman cars and the Highliners to receive repaints.
Okay.
Both the
I was
Pullmans
thinking to
and
myself,
Highliners had both ends of
I
the
remember
cars.
seeing a lot of these videos with the orange front ends. Alright, did I say videos? I meant to say engines. And I remember seeing a lot of them with orange fronts like that, and I thought to myself, something's missing here. These cars do not look like the way I remember seeing them, and now, here they are, just the way I like it.
Changed from black to orange to better distinguish the ends of the cars and allow for better spotting in adverse weather.
Same reason why they gave me an orange
The
shirt
orange
at Wawa.
also complemented the colors of the company's freight rolling stock very nicely.
It actually does look
The
pretty
only
good.
cars to not receive this was Highliner 1509 and the lead Pullman car of Train 720, as both were
Yeah, I
scrapped
was gonna say, if they
after
didn't
the
receive it, they were
accident
probably
due to
scrapped.
significant damage. The other cars not to be repainted were two other Pullmans, numbered 1198 and 1380, as they were donated to the Illinois Railroad Museum the same
I remember
year the
seeing this
accident
picture
took
earlier,
place.
and I could have sworn it was at the IRM because of that Burlington Northern diesel there in the background. But that's pretty cool. The IRM really seems to have a lot of nice equipment. I definitely want to go see those when I get there.
In 1972. The rest of the Pullmans would be retired sometime around 1980.
Wow, they're around that long.
As for the
They really
Highliners,
were like the Midwest
they'd have
version
a
of the
pretty uneventful
MP54s.
career with Illinois Central, and would be joined by more Highliners in 1978 through 1979, numbered 1631 to 1666. This time, though, being built by Bombardier, not St.
Bombardier.
Louis. And then they were handed over
I
to
used
the
to
Regional
mispronounce that word as
Transportation
well. I always
Authority
thought it was called
before
Bombardier.
Metra in 1983. Metra inherited the cars when they took over the Illinois Central's electrified service in 1987, branding it as the Metra Electric line.
Yeah.
The cars would
Ivanhoe.
continue in service with Metra, eventually even being repainted,
I'd like to
until
check out that
finally
station.
being retired in 2016, being replaced
so they were
by newer double-decker EMUs.
That's still
built
pretty
by
impressive, though. The fact that they were around from 1972 to 2016. If only I got there sooner. I saw those cars on the left, though, when I was at Soldier Field. That was back in 2018.
Japanese firm Nippon Shiru from 2005
Nippon
to
Shiryu.
2006, and again with a second batch.
Wouldn't
from
surprise me if the
2012
Chicago
to
Northwestern had some of
2016.
those cars.
Funny enough, the
But I
new
think
cars
their
look almost
bi-levels-
exactly the same as the double-decker
interesting. Hang on.
coaches found all across the rest of
Yeah,
Metra's
that is
system.
interesting.
Approximately 20
Well, like I was saying, it wouldn't surprise me if Nippon Shiryu also had some cars for the Chicago Northwestern, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if they were also Pullman. They were a really popular company back then. Pullman did a lot of great stuff back then.
24 of the Highliners survive today, as Metra donated them to museums, including the previously mentioned Illinois Railroad Museum,
I didn't know that.
while the rest were sent away for scrap. As for 27th Street Station,
You know, it
while
would have been
still
cool if
exists,
one was
serving
at the
passengers as of
trolley
today,
museum near
the Michael Roost
Steamtown.
Hospital does not.
They have a
It was
really
closed
cool
for
car from
good on
SEPTA, though,
August
called the
31st,
JG
2009,
Bro Bullet.
and subsequently demolished
Thunderbolt
by
and Thousand Signs
October
Productions has another cool
2013.
video regarding those in his Engines
While
of
being
SEPTA
one of the
series.
darkest days in American railroad history, the collision, while largely overshadowed by other devastating accidents, will certainly live on in the memories of those that were there that day when all hell broke loose on that fateful morning.
Right, yeah. Good music, too, and I like how you get to see more of this footage with these bi-levels in Metro service. Texas County Rail fan. Alright, so he was the guy we heard earlier voicing that one guy. I'm still surprised that the NTSB covered the accident instead of the Interstate Commerce Commission. Because ICC, they still did a lot of things in the 70s. And they were even forced to take care of this, well, not take care, but follow the Staggers Act of 1980 that allowed deregulation to allow railroads to actually have an easier time making a profit as opposed to getting screwed over by the ICC. And then eventually in 1996, they got merged into the NTSB. I might actually consider joining his GoFundMe page. I'd like to try and donate to that. I mean, this guy does a lot of cool videos. I've seen him a few times in person as well. We had a lot of fun. As a matter of fact, he gave me permission in person when we were in Jim Thorpe a month ago seeing 425 on her very last run with the Autumn Leaf Excursion. That was a really wonderful show. My hearing got a little hurt because I was standing at this one crossing in Nesquehoning, and 425 had, I guess it was like, I don't know how long it was, but her wheel slipped and it hurt my ears, but it was still worth it. That was a really fun thing to catch on video. And that's it. Thank you guys for joining me on this wonderful video. Thunder, keep up the good work. Thanks again for subscribing to my channel. And I will see you guys with another reaction video.